The explosion ripped through the night, sending a column of flame skyward from the port side of the USS Valkyrie. Lieutenant Arya Voss gripped the railing as the deck lurched beneath her boots, the taste of gunpowder thick in the air. Around her, sailors scrambled across the steel plating, their shouts barely audible over the shriek of alarms and the distant rumble of enemy fire. She had been aboard for less than 6 hours. Temporary personnel assignment, the orders had read. No explanation, no context. Just report to the Valkyrie before it departed with the humanitarian convoy. The crew barely registered her presence, a small figure in standard-issue fatigues, her dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Nothing remarkable to distinguish her from any other junior officer. Admiral Richard Hargrove stood at the center of the command deck, his weathered face twisted with frustration as reports flooded in from every station. The bridge lights flickered red, casting harsh shadows across tactical displays that showed far too many hostile contacts closing in. "Where's the backup team?" Hargrove barked at his operations officer. "I was promised a full security detail." "Sir, personnel command only cleared one replacement." Lieutenant Voss. The Admiral's eyes swept the bridge until they landed on Arya. She stood near the communications station, hands clasped behind her back, watching the tactical situation unfold with quiet intensity. "You?" Hargrove's voice dripped with disbelief. He strode toward her, each step heavy with barely contained rage. "They send me one person? One lieutenant?" Arya met his gaze without flinching. "Sir, I'm here to assist however needed." "Assist?" The Admiral's laugh was harsh, bitter. "Look around you, Lieutenant. We're being hammered by coordinated missile strikes. Our convoy is scattered. Half my crew is green, never seen real combat. And they send me you." He gestured dismissively, turning away. "You're useless here. Stand to the side. Try not to get in the way of people who actually know what they're doing." The words hung in the air. Several bridge officers glanced at Arya, some with sympathy, others simply too focused on their own panic to care. She said nothing, her expression unchanged. She simply moved to the indicated position near the bulkhead, her eyes continuing to track every detail, every decision, every mistake. What Admiral Hargrove didn't know, what no one aboard the Valkyrie knew, was that beneath the plain fatigues and unremarkable rank insignia, Arya Voss carried a different identity. Shadow Viper, one of 12 operatives in a unit that officially didn't exist, trained for exactly these moments when conventional forces found themselves backed into corners with no apparent way out. Another explosion shook the ship. The tactical display lit up with new contacts. "Admiral, enemy vessels detected closing fast. Range, 12 nautical miles and decreasing. Estimated time to engagement, 10 minutes. Hargrove's jaw clenched. "All hands to battle stations. Get me firing solutions on those ships." But Arya was already watching something else. The pattern of the attacks, the timing, the specific systems being targeted. This wasn't random. Someone knew exactly where to hit the Valkyrie to cause maximum damage with minimum resources. She remained silent, observing, calculating. Not yet time to act. The clock was ticking. The next 7 minutes dissolved into controlled chaos. Arya watched as the weapons officer attempted to acquire targeting locks on the approaching vessels, his fingers dancing across the console with increasing desperation. "Sir, I can't get a solid lock. Something's interfering with our targeting systems." "Override it," Hargrove ordered. "I'm trying, sir. It's like someone's flooding our sensors with false data." Arya's eyes narrowed. She moved slightly closer, angling her view to see the error codes flashing across the display. Her pulse quickened with recognition, though her face remained impassive. "Main battery offline," another officer reported. "Fire control systems not responding." "Engineering, report," the speaker crackled. "Admiral, we're locked out of primary weapons control. Someone's penetrated our network. This is a sophisticated hack, sir. Military-grade intrusion protocols." Hargrove slammed his fist against the command console. "How is that possible? We're supposed to have the best cybersecurity in the fleet." "Sir, they're using some kind of wave interference pattern," the radar operator called out. "I can see the missiles launching from their ships, but I can't track them once they enter a certain range. It's like they're invisible." "Evasive maneuver." "Sir, helm's not responding at optimal efficiency. We're sluggish, like something's fighting our commands." The Valkyrie shuddered as another impact struck the stern, sending personnel sprawling. Smoke began filtering through the ventilation system, acrid and choking. Arya recognized the signature immediately. The blind spots in the radar coverage, the precision of the network intrusion, the specific systems being targeted in sequence. She had encountered this exact methodology once before, in a classified operation off the coast of Somalia 3 years ago. Black Tide mercenaries, equipped with military hardware that shouldn't have existed on the black market. She approached the Admiral quietly. "Sir, request permission to examine the network intrusion." Hargrove barely glanced at her. "We have specialists for that, Lieutenant." "Sir, I have experience with—" "I don't have time for this." He cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Communications, get me a secure line to Fleet Command. We need reinforcements now." "Sir, communications are compromised. We can send basic signals but nothing encrypted." The Admiral's face went pale. A warship without secure communications, without weapons, without maneuverability. They were blind, deaf, and toothless. "Options," he demanded of his senior staff. "We can try to run," the executive officer suggested. "Make for the nearest Allied port. Hope we can outpace them." "We can't abandon the convoy," someone else objected. "The convoy's already scattered. Those ships are gone." Arya listened to the back and forth, watching the tactical situation deteriorate by the second. The enemy vessels had closed to 8 nautical miles. At their current speed, engagement would begin in 6 minutes. Maybe less. She made a decision. Without waiting for permission, she turned and headed for the hatch leading below decks. "Lieutenant," the Admiral's voice followed her. "Where do you think you're going?" She paused at the threshold, looking back. "To do my job, sir. I ordered you to stay out of the way." "With respect, Admiral, staying out of the way will get everyone on this ship killed." Before he could respond, she was through the hatch and moving down the ladder, her boots ringing against metal rungs as she descended toward the technical spaces deep in the Valkyrie's hull. Behind her, she heard Hargrove shouting orders, but the words were lost in the groan of stressed metal and the wail of alarms. 5 minutes until engagement. The technical bay was a maze of bundled cables, server racks, and cooling systems that hummed with barely contained energy. 2 engineers looked up in surprise as Arya dropped through the access hatch, landing lightly on the deck plates. "Ma'am, this area is restricted during combat operations," one of them said, a young specialist named Derek Chen, whose name tag was partially obscured by grease stains. "I'm aware," Arya replied, moving directly to the primary network terminal. "I need access to your intrusion detection logs. Now, Lieutenant, I can't just—" She pulled out her military ID, but instead of the standard chip, she pressed her thumb against a nearly invisible panel on its edge. The device emitted a brief ultraviolet pulse, invisible to the naked eye but clearly visible on any military-grade scanner. Chen's handheld device beeped. His eyes widened as he read the clearance level. "That's... How do you have Sigma-7 authorization?" "Because I need it for situations exactly like this one." Arya was already at the keyboard, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "How long have the intrusion protocols been active?" "About 14 minutes. Started right before the first missile strike. And you haven't been able to trace the source." The second engineer, an older woman named Patricia Reeves, shook her head. "It's like nothing I've seen. The code is constantly mutating, changing its signature every few seconds. By the time we identify one pathway, it's already shifted to 3 others." Arya pulled up the code structure on the main display, her eyes scanning the cascading lines of commands and protocols. Her blood went cold as recognition hit. "This is Echo Black architecture," she said quietly. "Echo what?" Chen asked. "A modular intrusion system developed by a private military contractor called Black Tide. They specialize in naval operations, mostly piracy protection officially, but they'll work for anyone who pays." She highlighted a specific sequence in the code. "See this recursion pattern? That's their signature. I've seen it before." "How would a lieutenant know about classified mercenary tech?" Reeves asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Arya didn't answer. She was already typing rapidly, pulling up counter-intrusion protocols that shouldn't have been in the Valkyrie's database. Because she was uploading them from memory, her fingers recreating code she had written during a joint operation with naval intelligence years ago. "What are you doing?" Chen moved closer, watching in fascination as the command strings appeared. "Deploying an adaptive firewall. It won't stop the intrusion completely, but it'll slow it down and give us back partial system control." Her fingers never stopped moving. "How much time until those enemy ships are in firing range?" Chen checked his watch. 3 minutes, maybe less. "Then I need to work faster." The code compiled, executed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, Slowly, sections of the network diagram began turning from red to yellow. "You're doing it," Reeves breathed. "The intrusion is losing ground. Only about 30% restoration," Arya cautioned. "They'll adapt to my countermeasures within minutes. But it should be enough to get weapons control back online, at least partially." She opened a ship-wide communication channel. "Bridge, this is Lieutenant Voss in Technical Bay. I've restored approximately 30% of system functionality. You should have limited weapons control in 10 seconds. The response came immediately, Admiral Hargrove's voice crackling with static and anger. "Lieutenant, you are operating outside your authority. You were ordered to remain on the bridge." "Sir, with respect, I was ordered to stay out of the way. I'm trying to keep us alive. You have no authorization to access those systems." "Actually, sir, I do." She kept her voice level, professional. "Sigma 7 clearance, Special Operations Authority. Check with your security officer." A pause. Then, quieter, more dangerous. "We'll discuss this after the engagement, if we survive." Arya closed the channel and turned back to the engineers. "I need to see the external sensor logs. Something about their attack pattern is bothering me." Chen pulled up the data, and Arya's worst suspicion was confirmed. The tactical display showed not just the approaching surface vessels, but faint thermal signatures beneath the waterline, converging on the Valkyrie's hull. "They've deployed underwater assets," she said. "Probably demolition specialists placing charges on the hull." "How do you know that?" Reeves demanded. "Because it's what I would do if I wanted to ensure a disabled ship couldn't escape." Arya was already moving toward the weapons locker on the bulkhead. "They hit us with the cyber attack to blind and disable us, then they move in divers to plant explosives. When they detonate those charges, the Valkyrie breaks apart from the inside." "So what do we do?" Arya opened the locker and pulled out a combat diving kit, checking the rebreather system with practiced efficiency. "I go down there and stop them." "You can't be serious," Chen said. "That's suicide." "It's necessary." She secured the kit and headed for the equipment room where diving gear was stored. "Keep working on the network. Every percentage point of system recovery gives the bridge more options." "Lieutenant Voss," Reeves called after her. "Who are you really?" Arya paused at the hatchway, glancing back. For a moment, something flickered in her expression, a hint of the weight she carried. "Someone who's very good at staying alive, Chief. And making sure others do too." Then she was gone, moving toward the aft diving station while above them, the first enemy shells began to find their range. The diving station was a small chamber near the waterline, designed for hull inspections and emergency repairs. Arya worked with mechanical efficiency, pulling on the wetsuit and checking her equipment. The rebreather was fully charged, the underwater communications system functional, the combat knife secured to her thigh. She had done this before. Dozens of times, in conditions far worse than these. But never from a ship actively under attack, never while racing against a demolition team that was already in position. The station supervisor, a gray-haired warrant officer named Marcus Webb, watched with growing alarm as she prepared. "Lieutenant, this is insane. You'll be in the water alone, at night, with hostiles already present. And those aren't just divers, those are combat swimmers. Trained killers. I know what they are." Arya secured her mask and activated the rebreather. "I need you to track my position and relay information to the bridge. If I find the explosives, I'll mark them with strobes so the hull can be reinforced from inside. And if you run into the enemy swimmers?" She met his gaze through the mask, her eyes cold and certain. "Then they picked the wrong ship to attack." Before Webb could argue further, she entered the airlock chamber. The door sealed behind her with a heavy clang. Water began flooding in, cold and black, rising rapidly around her legs, her waist, her chest. She controlled her breathing, staying calm as the chamber filled completely. The outer hatch opened with a dull clunk. Arya slipped through into the open ocean. The world transformed instantly. Sound became muffled, distorted. The Valkyrie's hull rose above her like a steel cliff face, illuminated by red emergency lights that cast eerie shadows into the depths. The water was frigid despite the tropical latitude, somewhere around 60 degrees, cold enough to sap strength and speed reaction time. She descended along the hull, using the maintenance handholds welded into the plating. Her underwater lamp cut through the darkness, revealing barnacles, rust streaks, and the occasional startled fish darting away from the light. Then she saw it. A dark shape attached to the hull about 30 feet below her position. Rectangular, roughly 2 feet on each side, with electronic components visible in its housing. A limpet mine magnetically clamped to the Valkyrie's armor. Arya swam toward it, but halfway there, her combat instincts screamed a warning. She twisted in the water, knife appearing in her hand with fluid precision, just as a figure in black emerged from the darkness behind her. The enemy swimmer was heavily armed, combat knife in one hand, underwater pistol in the other. He fired, the specialized round creating a stream of bubbles as it passed inches from Arya's head. She dove beneath the shot, using the hull as cover, her mind automatically cataloging details. Black-tied gear, military-grade rebreather, professional equipment. These weren't amateurs. The swimmer closed the distance, knife leading. Underwater combat was different from surface fighting. Every movement slowed by water resistance, every action requiring 3 times the energy. But Arya had trained for this, had fought in conditions just like these during her Shadow Viper qualification course. She parried his knife thrust, redirected his momentum, and drove her own blade toward his rebreather hose. He blocked, twisted, tried to bring his pistol to bear. She grabbed his wrist, used the hull for leverage, and slammed his hand against the steel plating. The pistol tumbled away into darkness. Now it was just knives and skill. They circled each other in the underwater gloom, 2 predators assessing, waiting for openings. He lunged again, faster than expected, forcing Arya to give ground. Her back hit the hull. He pressed the advantage, driving forward with brutal efficiency. But Arya had been waiting for exactly that. She planted her feet against the hull and pushed off, using his own momentum against him. They tumbled through the water, struggling for position. Her knee found his solar plexus, driving the air from his rebreather. He gasped, bubbles streaming from his mask, and she took the opportunity. Her knife found the seal on his rebreather hose. Not a killing blow, but a disabling one. Water flooded his breathing system. He panicked, lost focus, and she drove him away with a hard kick to the chest. He retreated into darkness, struggling to reach the surface before he drowned. Arya didn't wait. She was already moving toward the limpet mine when 2 more shapes materialized from below. More swimmers, a 3-person team. She had seconds before they reached her. The mine was right there, within arm's reach, but if she stopped to disarm it, they would be on her. Decision point. Neutralize the swimmers first, or disarm the mine and hope she survived the fight afterward. Arya Voss had survived 12 years of special operations by making the hard choices fast and committing completely. She twisted in the water, put the mine at her back, and drew a second knife from her ankle sheath. 2 blades, 2 enemies. 30 seconds of air in her lungs before she needed to breathe again. She'd faced worse odds. The swimmers separated, trying to flank her. Professional tactics. But down here, in the dark water pressed against the Valkyrie's hull, Arya was in her element. This was what Shadow Viper had made her. She struck first, driving toward the closer swimmer with explosive speed. He raised his knife to block, expecting a direct attack. Instead, she rolled beneath him, cutting the straps on his weight belt. He immediately began rising toward the surface, suddenly and dangerously buoyant, his hands scrabbling to compensate. The second swimmer fired his pistol. The round grazed Arya's shoulder, a line of fire even through the wetsuit, but she was already moving. She closed the distance before he could fire again, got inside his guard, and went for his mask. Her fingers found the seal and ripped it free. Salt water flooded his face. He pulled back instinctively, hands going to his eyes, vision suddenly gone. She didn't give him time to recover. A hard strike to the side of the head with her knife pommel, and he went limp, sinking slowly. Arya's lungs burned. She needed air, but the mine was still active, still counting down to detonation, and there were potentially more swimmers in the area. She swam to the limpet mine, her hands finding the access panel. Military-grade explosives, motion-sensitive arming mechanism, magnetic clamps holding it to the hull, and a timer, glowing red numbers counting down in the darkness. 2 minutes, 40 seconds. Enough time to disarm it, if she worked fast and didn't make mistakes. But as her fingers found the first wire, her rebreather indicator flashed yellow. Low air. She had pushed too hard during the fights, breathed too heavily, used up her reserve. Choice again. Surface for air, or stay and disarm the mine. Above her, through the water, she heard the muffled boom of explosions as the enemy ships engaged the Valkyrie directly. People were dying up there. Her people, even if they didn't know it yet. Arya's fingers continued working. She would finish the job, or she would die trying. Arya surfaced 40 feet from the Valkyrie's stern, gasping for air. her shoulder burning from the pistol graze. Behind her, the limpet mine she had just disarmed sank into the depths, its electronics fried by the scrambler she had activated. But there were more. She had seen at least 3 others during her ascent, glowing faintly against the hull like deadly tumors. The night sky above was lit with tracer fire and missile contrails. The Valkyrie's defensive systems were functional again, thanks to her work in the technical bay, but they were badly outgunned. She could see at least 5 enemy vessels in a loose formation, closing to engagement range while maintaining fire superiority. She swam toward the diving station, pulled herself into the airlock, and cycled through. Webb was waiting, his face tense. "I saw 3 more mines on the hull," she reported, stripping off her gear. "Section C7, D3, and E9. You need to evacuate those compartments and reinforce the bulkheads from inside. When they detonate, it'll be catastrophic." "Already done," Webb said. "As soon as you marked the first one, I started internal protocols. But Lieutenant, the Admiral has ordered your arrest." "What?" "You exceeded your authority, accessed restricted systems, took combat action without orders. Webb shrugged helplessly. "He's not happy." Arya toweled off quickly and pulled on her fatigues. "Take me to the brig, then. But tell the Admiral he has maybe 10 minutes before those mines detonate. The timers are staggered, probably to maximize hull fracture." 2 Marines were waiting outside, looking uncomfortable. They escorted her through the ship, which was now a chaos of damage control teams, wounded being carried to medical, and the constant thunder of defensive fire. The Valkyrie was fighting for its life, but it was a losing battle. The interrogation room was a small compartment near the bridge, more of a conference room than a brig, but the Marines stationed themselves outside, and the door locked with a magnetic click. Arya sat down and waited, her mind still processing the tactical situation, calculating odds, considering options. The door opened 10 minutes later. Admiral Hargrove entered, followed by his executive officer, Commander Patricia Reeves from the technical bay, and an older man Arya didn't recognize wearing the insignia of a special operations liaison. "Lieutenant Arya Voss," Hargrove began, his voice tight with controlled anger. "You have willfully disobeyed direct orders, accessed classified systems without authorization, and taken independent combat action that could have compromised this vessel's security. In a combat situation, I could have you shot for less." Arya met his gaze calmly. "Yes, sir. You could. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I have 17 years of training and experience that this ship needed. I used it. That's my defense." The older man stepped forward, studying Arya with sharp eyes. "Commander Lawrence Thorne, Naval Special Warfare Command. I recognize some of your techniques, Lieutenant. The counter-intrusion protocols you deployed, the underwater combat tactics. Where did you learn them?" "Classified, sir." "Nothing's classified when you're facing a court-martial," Hargrove snapped. "Actually, Admiral," Thorne said quietly, "some things are." He pulled out a secure tablet and entered a long code sequence. "Lieutenant Voss, authorization code Sigma 7 requires voice verification. Please confirm your identity." Arya hesitated for just a moment, then spoke clearly. "Shadow Viper 3, service number classified, authentication code, Oscar Tango 779er. The tablet beeped, information flooded the screen. Thorne's eyebrows rose. He turned the tablet so Hargrove could see. The Admiral's face went through several shades of emotion, disbelief, shock, and finally, something that might have been fear. "Special Forces?" he said slowly. "Your Shadow Viper?" "Yes, sir. The unit that doesn't exist. The one that's only activated when conventional forces are judged to be in unwinnable situations." "That's an oversimplification, but essentially correct." Hargrove sat down heavily. "How long have you been aboard my ship?" 6 hours, sir. I was placed on your personnel manifest 48 hours ago when naval intelligence detected unusual mercenary activity in this region. My mission was to observe, assess, and intervene only if necessary." "Intervene," the Admiral repeated flatly. "You mean take over?" "No, sir. I mean save lives when the tactical situation reaches critical failure." She leaned forward slightly. "Admiral, I didn't come here to undermine your command. I came because someone knew you would be attacked, knew you would be outgunned, and knew you would need help that couldn't be provided through normal channels. Shadow Viper exists for exactly these scenarios." The ship shuddered as another impact struck home. Damage alarms wailed somewhere in the distance. "We're still losing," Hargrove said quietly, "even with your interventions." "Yes, sir. Black Tide is very good at what they do. They've crippled your ship, they've surrounded you, and those mines are still ticking. When they detonate, the Valkyrie will break apart. She paused. But I can stop them. How? By doing what I was trained to do. Go on offense. Hit them where they're vulnerable. Thorn crossed his arms. Explain. Arya stood and moved to the tactical display on the wall, bringing up the enemy formation. Black Tide's strength is their coordination. They're not a national military with distributed command structure. They're a private force operating from a single command vessel, probably this destroyer at the center of their formation. Every other ship takes orders from there. The cyber attack, the swimmer teams, the coordinated fire. It all flows through that central node, so we target their command ship, the XO said. Simple. Not simple, Arya corrected. Impossible, with conventional tactics. It's heavily defended, probably has the best electronic warfare suite money can buy, and it's positioned where our remaining weapons can't reach it effectively. Any missile we launch will be intercepted or spoofed. Then what are you proposing? Hargrove asked. Arya turned to face him directly. Let me take a 3-person team, infiltrate their command vessel, and shut down their coordination network from inside. Without central command, their formation falls apart. Your ship survives. The room fell silent except for the distant rumble of combat. That's suicide, the XO finally said. That's Tuesday, Arya replied. For Shadow Viper. Hargrove looked at Thorn. Can she actually do this? Thorn's expression was grim. If the files I just read are accurate, Lieutenant Voss has successfully completed 14 operations of similar or greater difficulty. Her survival rate in extreme circumstances is, he paused, searching for words, statistically anomalous. That's a diplomatic way of saying I'm still alive when I shouldn't be, Arya said. But I don't plan on dying today, Admiral. And I don't plan on letting your crew die either. Hargrove stood slowly, his earlier anger transformed into something else. Respect, perhaps. Or simply the desperate hope of a commander with no other options. What do you need? He asked. Arya smiled for the first time. A cold, professional expression. 2 people who can follow orders without question and won't panic when things get messy. A fast boat. And someone to tell your weapons crews not to shoot us when we come back. She moved to the door, paused, and looked back at the Admiral. I don't need you to trust me, sir. I just need you to stay alive long enough for me to finish the job. Then she was gone, leaving the command staff staring at each other in stunned silence as the Valkyrie shuddered under another barrage and the mines on its hull continued their deadly countdown. The planning session took place in a corridor outside the armory. Because every proper conference room was either damaged or full of wounded, Arya stood before a hastily mounted tactical display while 2 volunteers stood at attention beside her. Sergeant Nathan Pierce, communications specialist, 32 years old, 8 years in service. He had been the first to volunteer when Arya's request for technical support went out. His files showed expertise in network operations and electronic warfare, plus 3 tours in hostile waters. More importantly, he hadn't hesitated when told the mission involved boarding an enemy warship. Petty Officer First Class Janelle Torres, designated marksman, 27 years old, 9 years in service. She carried a modified M110 rifle and had the highest accuracy rating on the Valkyrie. Her service record included 2 Bronze Stars for actions in Somalia and a reputation for staying calm under pressure that bordered on legendary. Our target, Arya said, highlighting the enemy command vessel on the display, is the MV Serpent's Eye, a modified destroyer that Black Tide uses as their flagship for major operations. It's equipped with military-grade sensors, weapons systems, and most importantly, the central coordination network that's running this entire attack. How do you know all this? Torres asked. I've encountered Black Tide before. 3 years ago, off Somalia, they were running escort for arms smugglers. We shut down their operation, but not before I got a very close look at their methodology. Arya zoomed in on the command vessel's structure. The coordination network is housed in a hardened server room, here, amidships, 2 decks below the bridge. It's protected by physical security and electronic countermeasures. Nathan studied the layout. Getting to it means fighting through their crew. How many people are we talking about? Crew complement for a ship that size is probably 40 to 50 personnel. But most will be at battle stations, focused on the engagement with the Valkyrie. The interior should be relatively clear, except for security teams. Relatively clear, Torres repeated dryly. Famous last words. Our advantage is surprise, Arya continued. They don't expect anyone from a crippled warship to go on offense. We'll approach from their blind spot, board via the stern access point here, and move quickly through the ship before they can organize a response. She pulled up a technical schematic that made Nathan's eyes widen. Where did you get that? Classified. But it's accurate, verified within the last 18 months. So we board, fight our way to the server room, and then what? Torres asked. Blow it up? No explosives. Too much risk of friendly fire if we're still aboard when it detonates. Nathan will deploy a kill switch virus that will cascade through their network and shut down all coordinated operations. Ships will still function independently, but without central command, their tactical advantage evaporates. And while he's doing that, you and I hold off anyone trying to stop him, Torres concluded. Exactly. Nathan stepped closer to the display, his fingers tracing potential routes through the ship. This is insane. You know that, right? 3 people against 50, on their territory, with no backup and no extraction plan. There's always an extraction plan, Arya said calmly. It's called winning fast enough that we can leave before they kill us. That's not reassuring. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be accurate. She turned to face both of them directly. I won't lie to you. This mission has a high probability of casualties. If you want to back out, do it now. No judgment, no consequences. I'll find others. The two looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Torres shrugged. I've survived worse odds. Probably, define worse, Nathan muttered, but he was already nodding. I'm in. But I want hazard pay for this. Noted. Now gear up. We leave in 10 minutes. As they moved to the armory, Admiral Hargrove appeared at the end of the corridor. He walked toward Arya with the careful deliberation of someone who had just made a decision he might regret. I wanted to apologize, he said quietly, for what I said on the bridge, calling you useless. You didn't know who I was, Arya replied. No apology necessary. Still, I judged you without knowing the facts. That's poor leadership. You were stressed, under attack, and dealing with insufficient resources. You reacted like any commander would. Hargrove studied her for a moment. You're not what I expected from special forces. The others I've met, they had this arrogance, this need to prove they were the best in the room. The best operators don't need to prove anything, Arya said. They just need to get the job done and make sure everyone goes home alive. Is that what you'll do? Get everyone home? She met his gaze without flinching. I'll do everything in my power to make sure the Valkyrie survives, Admiral. That's the promise I can make. Whether I come back is less important than making sure your crew does. To me, it's equally important. You're my responsibility now, whether you're Shadow Viper or not. Arya nodded slowly. Then trust me to do this right, and be ready to take advantage when their coordination falls apart. That's when you'll have your window to either escape or counterattack. We'll be ready. He extended his hand. Good luck, Lieutenant. She shook it firmly. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity, sir. We're prepared. The opportunity is about to present itself. 5 minutes later, Arya, Nathan, and Torres were in a rigid-hull inflatable boat, their faces painted black, weapons checked and secured. The boat's engine was modified for silent running, barely a whisper as it pulled away from the Valkyrie's stern and headed into the darkness between ships. Above them, missiles and tracers lit the night sky. Below them, the mines on the Valkyrie's hull ticked down toward detonation. Ahead of them, an enemy warship bristling with weapons and crawling with hostile personnel waited, unaware that the hunters were about to become the hunted. Arya checked her watch. 18 minutes until the mines detonated. Plenty of time, she hoped. The stern access point on the Serpent's Eye was a maintenance hatch designed for at-sea repairs, located just above the waterline. Exactly the kind of entrance that security teams often overlooked because it seemed too difficult to use during combat operations. They had made the approach in complete darkness, cutting the boat's engine and paddling the last 100 yards by hand. The enemy vessel loomed above them, a wall of steel decorated with rust streaks and peeling paint that spoke of years operating outside legitimate military channels. Arya went up first, using magnetic climbing gear to scale the hull. She reached the hatch, examined the lock, and deployed a bypass tool that had cost naval intelligence several $1 million to develop. The mechanism clicked softly. She pulled the hatch open and slipped inside. The interior was dimly lit by red combat lighting, just like the Valkyrie. She found herself in a narrow maintenance corridor that stank of oil and old metal. Empty. She signaled down, and Torres and Nathan followed, moving with practiced silence. "Comms check," Arya whispered, activating her throat microphone. "Solid copy," Nathan confirmed. "Same," Torres added. "Which way?" Arya consulted the mental map she had memorized from the schematics. "Forward and up 2 decks. Stay tight, move fast. No gunfire unless absolutely necessary." They moved through the ship like shadows, Arya leading with her suppressed sidearm, Torres covering the rear, Nathan in the middle monitoring his electronic warfare suite for any sign they had been detected. The ship around them groaned and shuddered as its weapons fired at the Valkyrie, the sound of combat distant but constant. They passed through a galley where dirty dishes still sat on tables, evidence of a crew pulled away from meals by battle stations. They climbed a ladder shaft while the ship rocked from nearby explosions. They crossed a berthing area where empty bunks waited for sailors who might not return. And then they ran into the first security team. 3 men, heavily armed, rounding a corner just as Arya reached an intersection. For a frozen heartbeat, both groups stared at each other in surprise. Then training took over. Arya's first shot took the lead guard in the chest, the suppressed round making barely more sound than a cough. He dropped, already dead before his brain registered pain. The second guard tried to bring his rifle up, but Torres was faster, 2 rounds catching him in the throat and forehead with mechanical precision. The third guard managed to trigger his radio. "Intruders. Deck 3, port side." Nathan's bullet cut off his words. He slumped against the bulkhead, hands still gripping the radio as life fled from his eyes. "They know we're here," Nathan said unnecessarily. "Then we move faster." Arya was already running, no longer concerned with stealth. Speed and violence of action now. Get to the target before they could organize a proper defense. They burst through a hatch into a main corridor and found themselves face to face with 6 more crew members, these ones just responding to the alarm, weapons unsecured. Surprise clear on their faces. Arya didn't give them time to recover. She closed the distance with explosive speed, striking the nearest man with the butt of her pistol before he could raise his rifle. She took his weapon as he fell, used it to block a knife thrust from another attacker, then drove her elbow into his face with a crunch of broken cartilage. Torres was firing in controlled bursts, dropping targets with clinical efficiency. Nathan had drawn his sidearm and was laying down suppressing fire, not the most accurate but enough to keep heads down and buy time. "Hatch ahead," Arya shouted, pointing to a reinforced door marked with security warnings. "That's our target." But between them and the server room stood a final obstacle. A man in black tactical gear, clearly the head of security, armed with a compact submachine gun and wearing the expression of someone who had been waiting for exactly this kind of situation. Arya recognized him instantly. Yuri Volkov, former Russian Spetsnaz, now Black Tide's head of operations. She had last seen him 3 years ago in Somalia, right before she had destroyed his team's operation and cost him millions in lost contracts. "You," Volkov said, recognition dawning in his eyes. "The ghost from Mogadishu." "Hello, Yuri. Nice ship you have here. Mind if I break it?" His response was to open fire, forcing the team to dive for cover behind a structural support. Bullets sparked off metal, ricocheting with dangerous whines through the confined space. "Torres, high position," Arya barked. "Nathan, get that door open, now." Torres rolled to the side, found a raised platform near the ceiling meant for cable routing, and climbed up in 3 quick movements. From her elevated position, she had a clear shot at Volkov's position. She fired twice, forcing him to retreat behind a bulkhead. Nathan sprinted to the server room door, deploying his cutting torch to attack the lock mechanism. "This is going to take 60 seconds, he called out. "We don't have 60 seconds. As if to prove her point, reinforcements arrived. A dozen crew members poured into the corridor from both directions, trapping the team in a crossfire. Arya made a split-second decision. She pulled a flashbang grenade from her vest, the only one she had brought, and threw it down the corridor toward the larger group. Flashbang. Close your eyes. The grenade detonated with a thunderous crack and a burst of blinding light. Men screamed, clutching at their faces, temporarily disabled. Arya used the confusion to advance on Volkov's position, firing as she moved, each shot precise and calculated. Volkov tried to fall back, but Torres had him pinned from above. He took a round in the shoulder, spun, and returned fire one-handed. His bullets came dangerously close to Arya's head, forcing her to duck. 30 seconds, Nathan shouted. Torres dropped down from her perch, landed next to Arya, and they both advanced together, covering each other with practiced precision. This was what they trained for. what separated Special Operations Forces from regular military. The ability to function as a single entity, each operator anticipating the other's moves. Volkov was good, better than good, but he was one man against two highly trained operators, and he was wounded. He fell back toward a secondary hatch, still firing, but his movements were slowing, the blood loss taking its toll. "Doors open," Nathan called. "Go," Arya ordered. "We'll hold them." Nathan disappeared into the server room while Arya and Torres set up a defensive position at the entrance. The corridor was a shooting gallery now, enemy personnel trying to advance but meeting controlled fire every time they showed themselves. "How long does he need?" Torres asked between shots. 3 minutes to deploy the virus. 5 if they have better security than expected. We might not have 5 minutes. Then we make 5 minutes. They settled into a rhythm. Torres taking high targets, Arya focusing on low, controlling angles, using ammunition efficiently, making every shot count. This was their world now, reduced to simple mathematics of trajectory and timing. Inside the server room, Nathan was working at frantic speed, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he bypassed security protocols and deployed the cascading virus that would shut down Black Tide's coordination network. Sweat poured down his face despite the air conditioning. Outside, he could hear the constant crack of gunfire, knew his teammates were buying him time with their lives potentially on the line. Come on, he muttered, watching progress bars crawl across his screen. Just a little more. In the corridor, Volkov had recovered enough to make another push. He appeared around the corner with 3 more men, all firing in a coordinated burst that forced Arya and Torres to take full cover. "Torres, grenade," Arya shouted, pulling her last fragmentation grenade from her vest. But before she could throw it, the lights flickered. Once, twice, then died completely, plunging the corridor into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in a dim red glow. And in that brief moment of confusion, Nathan's voice came through the comm system, triumphant and exhausted. "Virus is deployed. Network is down. Get out of there." Arya didn't hesitate. "Torres, with me. We're leaving." Now, they laid down a final burst of suppressing fire and sprinted back the way they had come, Nathan joining them from the server room. Behind them, they could hear Volkov shouting orders, organizing pursuit. But his voice was different now, confused, uncertain, because all around them, the ship was changing. The coordinated hum of systems working in harmony was becoming a discordant mess. Weapons, stations were losing targeting data. Communications were fragmenting. The carefully orchestrated attack on the Valkyrie was falling apart as individual ship commanders suddenly found themselves operating without central command. The 3 operators ran through corridors now filled with confused crew members, some trying to stop them, others just trying to understand what had happened to their systems. They fought their way through, leaving bodies and chaos in their wake, moving on pure adrenaline and training. They reached the maintenance hatch where they had entered. Torres went through first, then Nathan. Arya paused at the threshold, looking back one final time. In the red-lit corridor, she could see Volkov approaching, limping from his shoulder wound but still determined. Their eyes met across the distance. "This isn't over," he called out. "Yes," Arya replied quietly. "It is." Then she dropped through the hatch and into the waiting boat below, and the darkness of the ocean swallowed them whole. The rigid hull inflatable boat cut through the dark water, its electric motor pushing them away from the Serpent's Eye as fast as the small craft could manage. Behind them, the enemy warship was lit up like a Christmas tree, every hatch and porthole blazing with light as the crew scrambled to understand what had gone wrong with their systems. "Valkyrie, this is Viper 3, Arya spoke into her radio. "Mission accomplished. Network is down. Repeat, coordination network is offline." Admiral Hargrove's voice came back immediately, tension and relief warring in his tone. "Copy that, Viper 3. We're seeing the effects already. Enemy fire is becoming disorganized. Excellent work, sir. Recommend immediate." The sky lit up with a brilliant flash. All 3 operators turned to see the Serpent's Eye launching a salvo of missiles, but these weren't aimed at the Valkyrie. They were programmed for proximity detonation, designed to create a field of shrapnel and blast effects in the water around the enemy vessel. "They're scuttling," Nathan shouted. "They're going to blow the ship." "Not scuttling," Arya corrected, her voice grim as realization hit. "They're trying to take us with them. Get us away from here, maximum speed." But the small boat's motor, designed for stealth rather than speed, couldn't outrun a blast wave. The first missile detonated 200 yards behind them, sending a wall of water and force racing across the ocean's surface. The boat was picked up like a toy, flipped, and thrown tumbling through the air. Arya hit the water hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Her vision went dark at the edges. Training took over, keeping her from inhaling seawater. She kicked toward what she hoped was the surface, her ears ringing from the explosion, her shoulders screaming where the Grey's wound had reopened. She broke the surface, gasping, and immediately looked for the others. Nathan, Torres. Here. Torres's voice, 20 feet away, already swimming toward the overturned boat. Nathan? Arya called again, a pause that lasted too long. Then, weakly, I'm hit. Arya swam toward his voice, found him floating face up, one hand pressed against his side where blood was turning the water dark. Shrapnel from the blast had caught him, possibly pierced through to vital organs. I've got you, she said, getting an arm around him. Stay with me. Boat's sinking, Torres reported, reaching them. We're 2 miles from the Valkyrie with an injured man and enemy ships all around. Ideas? Before Arya could answer, searchlights from the Serpent's eyes swept across the water, hunting for survivors. They were exposed, helpless, and Nathan was losing blood fast. We need to signal the Valkyrie, Arya decided. Torres, do you still have your emergency beacon? Yes, but if I activate it, every enemy ship will see it. That's a risk we have to take. Nathan won't survive if we try to swim back on our own. Torres pulled the beacon from her vest, hesitated for just a moment, then activated it. The device began pulsing a bright orange light, visible for miles in the darkness, and immediately, the searchlights converged on their position. Well, Torres said conversationally, that got their attention. The Serpent's eye was turning, bringing its guns to bear. Without coordination protocols, the ship was operating on basic command authority, but basic was enough to kill 3 people floating helpless in the water. Valkyrie, Arya transmitted, we need immediate extraction. Our position is marked by emergency beacon. Enemy vessel is engaging. Copy, Viper 3. Fast boat is launching now. ETA 4 minutes. 4 minutes. They had to survive 4 minutes while an enemy warship tried to kill them. The first shots from the Serpent's eye were cautious, ranging shots designed to find the correct elevation and distance. They impacted 50 yards away, sending up geysers of water that came down like rain. The next salvo would be closer. Dive, Arya shouted. On my mark, we go under and swim away from the beacon. What about Nathan? Torres asked. I'll hold him. Just make sure you can find us when we surface. The Serpent's eye fired again. The shells screamed overhead and detonated 30 yards away. Close enough that the pressure wave hurt. Far enough that they weren't shredded by shrapnel. Now, Arya pulled Nathan under, swimming down and away from the beacon's position. Torres followed, her powerful strokes taking her deeper and faster. They kicked hard, lungs burning, ears pressurized, the surface world vanishing above them into confused darkness. Arya counted in her head. 15 seconds. 20. 30. Nathan was a dead weight in her arms, semi-conscious from blood loss and shock. She couldn't hold him much longer, couldn't stay down much longer. 45 seconds. Her lungs were on fire. Black spots danced in her vision. 60 seconds. She aimed for the surface, kicking with the last of her strength. They broke through together, all 3 gasping and choking. Behind them, the water where they had been was churned into white foam by continued shelling, but the enemy was firing at the beacon, not their actual position. Boat, Torres shouted, pointing. A fast attack boat from the Valkyrie was racing toward them, its spotlight sweeping the water. Arya waved frantically, and the boat altered course, its engines roaring as it closed the distance. But the Serpent's eye had seen the boat too. Their guns swung toward this new target, and suddenly the rescue craft was running an evasive pattern, zigzagging to avoid incoming fire while still trying to reach the swimmers. They're not going to make it, Nathan whispered, his voice weak. Too much fire. They'll have to turn back. No, Arya said firmly. They won't, because now the Valkyrie itself was responding. She had watched from the water as the warship's main guns elevated and fired, sending rounds over their heads toward the Serpent's eye. The enemy vessel was forced to shift its attention from 3 swimmers to a direct engagement with a larger opponent. The rescue boat reached them in the chaos. Strong hands pulled Nathan aboard first, then Torres, then finally Arya. She collapsed on the deck, coughing up seawater, her entire body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline crash. "Corpsman to the casualty," the boat commander shouted. "Everyone else hold on, we're running." The boat accelerated hard, engines screaming, throwing up a rooster tail of spray as it raced back toward the Valkyrie. Around them, the naval engagement continued, but without coordination, the enemy ships were beginning to fall back, recognizing they had lost their tactical advantage. Arya pulled herself to Nathan's side. A Navy corpsman was working on him, applying pressure bandages, starting an IV, his hands steady despite the boat's violent motion. "How bad?" she asked. "Bad enough. Shrapnel penetrated his liver area. He needs a surgeon within the hour, or he won't make it. Then we get him to a surgeon." The corpsman met her eyes, and she saw the doubt there. The Valkyrie's medical facilities were limited, already overflowing with casualties from the earlier attack. Complex surgery in combat conditions was possible, but success rates were low. "Do your best," she said quietly. "That's all any of us can do." The boat reached the Valkyrie's side, and Nathan was rushed aboard on a stretcher, Torres and Arya following more slowly. As her feet touched the deck of the warship, Arya felt something shift inside her. The mission wasn't over, the fight wasn't finished, but they had turned the tide. Against impossible odds, with minimal resources, 3 people had changed the course of an entire naval engagement. That was what Shadow Viper existed for. That was why she would never quit, never stop, never accept defeat. Admiral Hargrove was waiting at the top of the ladder, his face showing the strain of the past hours, but also something new: respect, understanding. "The enemy fleet is withdrawing," he reported. "We've held them off. Because of what you did." Arya just nodded, too exhausted for words. "Your man, Nathan. The doctors are with him now. They're doing everything they can." "Thank you, sir." "No," Hargrove said firmly. "Thank you, Lieutenant. You saved my ship. You saved my crew. And I was ready to throw you off the bridge for being useless." Arya managed a tired smile. "You weren't wrong, Admiral. I am useless. For normal operations, standard procedures, peacetime routine. But when everything goes wrong, when the situation becomes impossible, that's when people like me stop being useless and start being exactly what's needed." She looked out at the ocean, at the enemy ships retreating into the distance, at the dawn beginning to break on the eastern horizon. That's why Shadow Viper exists. For the impossible days. And on this impossible day, they had won. 3 hours later, Arya stood in the Valkyrie's communication center, a secure terminal displaying encrypted data that had been recovered from the Serpent's Eye during the infiltration. Nathan's virus hadn't just disabled their coordination network, it had also downloaded their mission files, orders, and payment records. Commander Thorne from Naval Special Warfare stood beside her, his face growing darker as he read through the information. "This doesn't make sense," he said quietly. "Black Tide are mercenaries. They work for money, not ideology. But these orders, they were hired by the Chilean Republic." Arya knew the implications immediately. The Chilean Republic was supposedly neutral in the regional conflict, a small nation that had carefully maintained diplomatic relations with multiple powers. If they were covertly hiring mercenaries to attack humanitarian convoys, it meant the geopolitical situation was far more complex than anyone had realized. "It's worse than that," she said, highlighting another section of the data. "Look at the target priorities. The Valkyrie was the primary objective, not the convoy. They wanted to sink a U.S. warship in international waters and make it look like a pirate attack. An act of war without declaring war," Thorne concluded. "Start an international incident, blame it on criminals, and position themselves to benefit from the chaos." Exactly. The humanitarian mission was just the bait. They knew we'd send an escort, preferably understaffed and distracted by the complexity of protecting civilian vessels. The Valkyrie was supposed to be an easy target. They didn't count on Shadow Viper being aboard. "No," Arya agreed. "They didn't." Admiral Hargrove entered the communications center, followed by several senior officers. His expression was grave. "I've just finished a secure call with Fleet Command. They've reviewed your findings, Lieutenant. The political implications are substantial." "Sir, what happens now?" "Now the diplomats take over. Evidence of the Chilean Republic's involvement will be presented through proper channels. There will be sanctions, probably a Security Council resolution. The kind of boring, slow-moving bureaucratic response that makes people like us want to tear our hair out." He paused. "But it won't come to open war. You prevented that." "We prevented them from sinking the Valkyrie," Arya corrected. "But there's more going on here. Black Tide doesn't take contracts this risky without serious money and serious motivation. Someone convinced them it was worth attacking a US warship. You think there's another player involved? I know there is. The money trail in these files, it doesn't originate with Chilean. It's been laundered through 3 different banks and 2 separate nations. Someone wanted very badly to hide their involvement. Thorne leaned closer to the screen. Can you trace it back to the source? Given time and resources, yes. But that's not my job. I'm a trigger puller, not an analyst. She looked at Hargrove. Sir, with your permission, I'd like to remain aboard until we reach port. There may be additional intelligence value in debriefing your crew about the engagement, and I want to check on Nathan's condition. Permission granted. And Lieutenant, about what I said earlier, calling you Sir, Arya interrupted gently. You've already apologized. But I want to make something clear. You weren't entirely wrong. For 95% of military operations, someone with my training and clearance level would be useless. We're specialists, designed for very specific circumstances. If this convoy had made it through without incident, I would have remained in the shadows, never revealed my presence, and you never would have known I was aboard. But the convoy didn't make it through without incident. No, sir. Which is precisely why people like me exist. One of the junior officers appeared at the hatchway, looking nervous. Admiral, Lieutenant, the ship surgeon wants to see you. It's about Sergeant Pierce. They hurried to the medical bay, where the surgical team was just finishing up. The lead surgeon, a veteran Navy doctor named Captain Michaels, pulled down his mask and met them with an expression that was carefully neutral. He's alive, Michaels said immediately, noting their tense faces. The shrapnel missed his liver by less than a centimeter. Incredible luck. We've removed the fragments, repaired the damage, and he's stable. Barring complications, he should make a full recovery. Arya felt tension she hadn't realized she was carrying drained from her shoulders. Can I see him? He's in recovery, still unconscious. But yes, briefly, she entered the recovery ward, found Nathan's bed among the rows of wounded sailors. He looked small and vulnerable without his combat gear, hooked to monitors and IV drips, his face pale against the white sheets. Torres was already there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, still wearing her salt-stained fatigues. She looked up as Arya approached. He's going to be okay, Torres said. It wasn't a question. He's going to be okay, Arya confirmed. They sat in silence for a moment, 2 warriors watching over their fallen comrade, the bond that existed between people who had faced death together and survived. I've been in the Navy 9 years, Torres said quietly. Done 3 tours, seen action in 4 different operations. But nothing like tonight. 3 people against an entire enemy force, and we won. We got lucky, Arya replied. That wasn't luck. That was training, skill, and planning, and leadership. Torres turned to look at her directly. You gave us a mission that should have been impossible, and you made us believe we could do it. That's what leaders do. I'm not a leader. I'm just someone who refuses to accept impossible as an answer. Same thing, in my book. Outside the medical bay, dawn was fully breaking now, light streaming through the portholes and reflecting off the ocean surface. The Valkyrie was steaming toward the nearest friendly port, escorted now by 2 destroyers that had arrived during the early morning hours. The enemy fleet had scattered completely, their coordination shattered, their mission failed. Admiral Hargrove found Arya on the bridge an hour later, standing near the viewport and watching the horizon. The bridge crew was busy with standard operations, the emergency atmosphere replaced by the routine tasks of running a warship. I've been thinking about what you said, Hargrove began. About Shadow Viper existing for impossible situations. It made me wonder, how many impossible situations have you solved that no one ever knew about? 14 confirmed operations over 12 years, Arya replied. Plus various smaller interventions that didn't require full mission profiles. And in all that time, did you ever fail? She was quiet for a long moment. Once. 6 years ago, in the South China Sea, we were too late, arrived after the incident had already turned catastrophic. 3 ships lost, over 200 personnel. That mission taught me that impossible situations have windows of opportunity, and if you miss the window, all the training and skill in the world won't matter. Is that why you acted so quickly aboard the Valkyrie? Without waiting for full authorization? Yes, sir. I saw the window starting to close. If I had waited for proper channels, for bureaucratic approval, for everyone to be comfortable with my involvement, we would all be dead right now. Hargrove nodded slowly. You operate in the spaces between the rules. I operate where the rules break down, where normal command structure can't function, where conventional wisdom fails. That's the gap that Shadow Viper fills. It must be lonely. Arya smiled slightly. Sometimes. But then I remember what's at stake. People's lives. The success or failure of critical missions. That makes the loneliness bearable. She turned to face him fully. Admiral, you have a good crew. They fought well under terrible circumstances. Whatever happens with the diplomatic fallout from this incident, make sure they're recognized. They held this ship together when it should have fallen apart. I will. And what about you, Lieutenant? Will there be any recognition for what you did? Shadow Viper doesn't get medals, sir. We get to walk away alive and know we made a difference. That's recognition enough. A communications officer approached. Admiral, sir, we're being hailed by the escort destroyers. They want to know if we need additional assistance. Tell them negative. We're secure and making for port under our own power. He glanced at Arya. Thanks to our very capable crew. The officer saluted and returned to his station. Hargrove watched him go, then spoke more quietly. When this is all over, when the reports are filed and the investigation's complete, what happens to you? I disappear again. Back into the shadows, waiting for the next impossible situation. That's how it works. Will we ever meet again? Hopefully not, sir. Because if we do, it means something has gone catastrophically wrong somewhere. She extended her hand. But if we do meet again, I hope it's under better circumstances. They shook hands, a warrior's grip, mutual respect acknowledged without words. As Arya left the bridge, she passed crew members who nodded to her with new understanding. Word had spread throughout the ship about what had happened, about the small lieutenant who had turned out to be so much more than she appeared. She heard whispered conversations as she walked. That's her, Shadow Viper. She saved us all. But Arya just kept walking, heading back to her temporary quarters to finally get some rest. Because in the end, the whispers didn't matter. The recognition didn't matter. What mattered was that the Valkyrie and its crew would see another sunrise. That was victory enough. The Valkyrie reached port 2 days later, steaming into the harbor with visible battle damage but her colors still flying proudly. The pier was crowded with personnel from the naval base, media crews kept at a careful distance, and various brass from Fleet Command who had flown in for the arrival. Arya stood on the deck in fresh fatigues, watching the approach with mixed feelings. She had already filed her after-action reports, had been debriefed 3 times by different intelligence agencies, and had received orders to remain available for potential testimony before classified congressional hearings. The quiet anonymity of Shadow Viper was temporarily suspended while the bureaucratic machinery ground through its processes. Nathan had been transferred to a hospital ship the previous day, stable and recovering well. Torres stood beside Arya at the rail, both of them watching the bustling activity of the port. This is the part I hate, Torres said quietly. The aftermath. All the politics and posturing and people who weren't there claiming credit or assigning blame. It's part of the job, Arya replied. We do the hard part. They do the complicated part. Both are necessary. Doesn't mean I have to like it. The ship docked with a gentle bump and the sound of mooring lines being secured. Admiral Hargrove had already moved to the gangway, preparing to meet the welcoming committee. But before he descended, he turned and called across the deck. Lieutenant Voss, Petty Officer Torres, front and center, please. They exchanged glances, then made their way through the gathered crew to where the Admiral stood. The entire ship's company had assembled, hundreds of sailors in dress uniforms, standing at attention. What's happening? Torres whispered. I have no idea, Arya admitted. Hargrove waited until they reached him, then turned to face the assembled crew. When he spoke, his voice carried across the deck with the authority of decades in command. Officers and enlisted personnel of the USS Valkyrie, we have survived an engagement that should have destroyed us. We faced a coordinated attack by a superior force using tactics and technology designed to neutralize our advantages. By every tactical analysis, we should not be standing here today. He paused, letting the words sink in. But we are standing here. Because when the situation became impossible, when conventional responses failed, when the enemy had us outmatched and outgunned, 3 people refused to accept defeat. They volunteered for a mission that had minimal chances of success and maximum chances of casualty. They infiltrated an enemy warship, disabled their coordination network, and fought their way back out against overwhelming odds. Hargrove turned to face Arya and Torres directly. Lieutenant Arya Voss and Petty Officer Janelle Torres. On behalf of the entire crew of the USS Valkyrie, I want you to know that we are alive because of your actions. Every person on this ship owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You represent the absolute best of what our military can produce. Warriors who understand that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. The Admiral saluted them. Behind him, the entire crew followed suit, hundreds of hands raised in synchronized respect. Arya felt something unexpected tighten in her chest. She had received commendations before, had been thanked by presidents and generals, had files full of classified citations for operations that would never be publicly acknowledged. But this was different. This was her peers, people who had been in the fight beside her, recognizing not the mission but the cost. She returned the salute crisply, Torres doing the same beside her. "Sir," Arya said when the salute was completed, "we were just doing our jobs. The real heroes are the crew who kept this ship fighting when every system was compromised. They're the ones who deserve recognition, and they'll get it," Hargrove assured her. "But you need to understand something, Lieutenant. For 12 years, you've been operating in the shadows, doing impossible things that no one ever hears about. Today, just this once, you're getting recognition. Accept it with the grace it's offered." Arya nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." As the crew broke formation and began disembarking, dozens of sailors stopped to shake Arya's hand, offer quiet words of thanks, or simply nod with understanding. She accepted each gesture with humility, aware that this moment was as much for them as it was for her. They needed to know that when everything went wrong, there were people trained and ready to step into the gap. Torres was receiving similar attention, her usually stoic expression softened by genuine emotion. The bond formed in combat was unlike any other, and today, that bond was being acknowledged and honored. Later, in the privacy of a shoreside office, Commander Thorne met with Arya to discuss her next steps. "Your presence here has been compromised," he said without preamble. "Too many people know about Shadow Viper now, even if they don't know all the details. We'll need to reassign you, probably to a different theater entirely." "I understand. The good news is that your operation aboard the Valkyrie is being studied as a case example for special operations integration with conventional forces. We've learned valuable lessons about how to deploy assets like you more effectively. Lessons like don't dismiss people based on appearances," Arya suggested with a hint of dry humor. Thorne smiled slightly. "Among others. But seriously, you did exceptional work. The intelligence gathered from the Serpent's Eye is already bearing fruit. We've traced the money trail back 2 more levels, getting closer to identifying who was really behind the attack. Any surprises?" "Several. But they're above your clearance level right now. Once we have the full picture, you'll be briefed." He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Sergeant Pierce is awake and asking for you. I thought you'd want to know." Arya was at the hospital within the hour. Nathan looked much better, color back in his face, sitting up in bed and arguing with a nurse about his dietary restrictions. "There she is," he said with a grin as Arya entered. "The woman who got me shot." "You volunteered," Arya reminded him. I know, and I'd do it again." His expression turned more serious. "Torres visited earlier, told me what happened after I got hit. How you held me in the water, kept me alive until the rescue boat arrived. I never got to say thank you." "You don't need to thank me. We're a team. That's what teams do." "Yeah, but still," he gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Sit. Tell me what I missed during my drug-induced nap." Arya filled him in on the aftermath, the intelligence findings, the recognition ceremony aboard the Valkyrie. Nathan listened intently, occasionally asking questions or offering observations. "So what happens now?" he asked finally. "To you, I mean. Do you disappear back into wherever Shadow Viper people disappear to?" "Eventually. But first there's paperwork, debriefings, probably some congressional testimony that I'm not looking forward to. The usual bureaucratic aftermath of operations that go public must be weird for you." "Being visible." "It is," Arya admitted. "I'm used to being the person no one notices, the face in the crowd that doesn't register. Having people recognize me, know what I do, it's uncomfortable. Maybe that's good though. Maybe people should know that there are operators like you out there, ready to step up when things go sideways. Maybe. But there's value in secrecy too. If our enemies know who we are, they can plan for us, prepare countermeasures. Shadow Viper works best when we're unexpected." Nathan nodded thoughtfully. "I get it. You're the ace up the sleeve, the card nobody sees coming." Something like that. They talked for another hour, covering everything and nothing. The kind of conversation that people have when they've been through combat together and survived. Eventually, a doctor came by to check on Nathan, and Arya excused herself to let him rest. As she left the hospital, her phone buzzed with a secure message. New orders. Report to Naval Special Warfare Command, Norfolk, Virginia. Transportation arranged. Departure in 48 hours. The next mission was already waiting. Arya stood on the sidewalk outside the hospital, watching the sun set over the harbor. The Valkyrie was visible in the distance, berthed and surrounded by repair crews. In a few months, the damage would be fixed, the ship would put back to sea, and a new crew would take her into new engagements. And somewhere out there, in waters still troubled and missions still classified, Shadow Viper would be watching, waiting, ready to step into the impossible spaces where conventional forces couldn't go. She thought about Admiral Hargrove's words. You operate in the spaces between the rules. Yes. That's exactly what she did, and as long as there were spaces that needed filling, as long as there were impossible situations that demanded impossible solutions, she would be there. Not for recognition, not for glory,